Senior Auditor Valerius Kraus. The preliminary internal report is complete.
Is it now?
Yes. We've cross-referenced the raw telemetry, the sector audits, and the civilian market analysis. Specifically, the data provided by Auspex Tactics.
Right.
Our immediate directive is to conduct a forensic deep dive, an audit of the systemic fiscal failures plaguing the Imperium's core operational assets.
Servitor.
Not
Auditor. Stop calling it a deep dive. This is not, some recreational swim. This is an official, mandatory insolvency report.
Understood.
It details catastrophic mismanagement across multiple sectors. We are here to document the spectacular, galaxy-spanning failure of galactic management. We are not here to discuss your little plastic toy soldiers.
Of course.
You and the listener, this gloss-brained wastage currently trying to understand high finance through military failure, will refer to these operational segments by their true classification.
Legitimate.
Liabilities. They are liabilities. I don't care about their narrative, their zealotry, or their heroic stories. I care about the actuarial math. I care about ROI, return on investment. Do you have any idea at all, of the true cost of a single misfired bolt shell? Answer me.
No, Auditor, I do not.
Precisely. The objective is identification and quantification, points of failure, logistical pyramids, gross misallocation of assets. All of it using statistical evidence and competitive metrics.
I understand.
We are the architects of cold, hard truth. Now, stop shaking, pull the files. Batch 1.
Right away.
The elite liquidity crisis. We begin with the Imperium's most expensive, most gold-plated, and yet somehow most catastrophically fragile assets. Start with the custodes. They are the very definition of an overleveraged portfolio.
File A, Adeptus Custodes. Status, terminal.
Yes. The paperwork here suggests a complete, skill floor collapse.
Yeah.
Servitor, I want the precise data. The numerical indictment that supports this catastrophic assessment of the Emperor's personal guard.
Auditor, the report identifies the primary weakness as a stat check failure.
A stat check failure. Go on.
They are priced conceptually as immortal demigods. T6, a 2+ standard save.
I can read the data sheet. Get to the point of failure.
Their defensive profile, specifically the crucial 4++ invulnerable save, is confirmed to be a mathematical failure when exposed to high-volume fire.
A mathematical failure.
Yes, especially anything that incorporates the devastating wounds or lethal hits rules.
So they're dying to flashlights.
In a manner of speaking, yes.
We are spending the GDP of a minor subsector on outfitting these subjects in aurosite plate that costs more than a planetary governor's palace. And they are being liquidated by massed, medium-strength fire from units barely worth a third of their cost. Servitor, explain the math of the failure for the listener. They need to understand the betrayal of the numbers.
The core failure, Auditor, is simple probability, while a 2+ save against a small number of shots is, well, it's nearly infallible.
But warfare isn't about small numbers of shots, is it?
No. The competitive environment is defined by volume. If the enemy forces 40 or 50 shots with S4 or S5 into that unit.
From a dozen units of generic battle line infantry, for example.
Exactly. Even the 4++ save will mathematically fail the unit. That sheer volume, combined with the current rule that allows some weapons to bypass armor entirely.
It means they just fold. Instantly.
Yes. They are elite assets designed for dueling, but they're being deployed into a modern war zone that emphasizes saturation fire.
This isn't the stuff of legend. This is basic actuarial science. It proves the folly of aggressive, concentrated investment into a single asset class.
So they're too specialized.
They're too few, and their cost requires them to be functionally immortal. But the rules, the rules treat them as merely difficult to kill, not impossible. And this leads directly to the trap, the God complex, does it not?
Yes, Auditor. The junior commanders suffer from a delusion of invincibility.
They look at the big, shiny model, and they believe the marketing.
They assume the 2+ save profile makes them tanky, leading them to aggressively push into the midboard where they inevitably suffer elite fragility.
They walk into the midfield expecting to brawl, relying on the visual heft of the model, and what happens?
They're met by 100 bolter rounds.
It's what happens when you believe the flavor text instead of the datasheet's cost. They get screened, shot to pieces, and fail to achieve any measurable primary objective. This isn't bravery, it's fiscal negligence. You spend 250 points on a unit that is wiped by 120 points of massed fire because you forgot that your invulnerability save only works half the time.
And once that unit is gone?
The commander has lost a quarter of his entire army's fighting force. The Custodes player is perpetually playing from a point deficit, It's an unsustainable business model.
Furthermore, Auditor, we must discuss the procurement scandal, the resin tax.
Ah, yes. This is where the fraud moves from negligence to systemic logistical malpractice. The faction lacks internal anti-tank assets.
Correct.
Tell me the hard facts, Servitor. Which assets are failing, and what exorbitant price must they pay for functionality?
The report states that their standard codex assets, specifically the plastic contemptor and Telemon dreadnoughts, are described as having the mobility of a brook and the firepower of, well, a wet noodle.
A wet noodle. Eloquent, so their heavy support is useless.
Their primary heavy weapons are insufficient in the current meta for eliminating high-toughness targets like enemy battle tanks or large monsters.
What do they do?
To achieve basic anti-tank capability, the faction is forced into a logistical pyramid scheme. They pay a premium Forge World tax for imported Gladius grav tanks.
An imported, bespoke, secondary market tax, Servitor. Look at the comparative cost structure here. We are paying premium prices, often for difficult-to-work-with resin models, merely to perform the basic anti-tank duty that a standard Space Marine list handles with a single, cheaper Gladiator Lancer.
So the core assets are inefficient.
They're useless. The commanders must engage in secondary market manipulation just to remain solvent in a competitive environment. They are functionally incapable of anti-tank warfare using their standard, readily available assets.
So the core issue, then, is that the internal design relies on an assumption of durability.
An assumption which is undermined by the current edition's mechanics, yes. They are designed for a war that no longer exists. They are wearing armor that costs more than a fleet, yet the return on investment is catastrophic because their defense is based on an outdated probability curve. Mark them as terminal, pending liquidation of all RSite stock and the immediate cessation of all Forge World procurement contracts until costs stabilize. Next file. B. World Eaters. Status, volatile.
Yes.
The report suggests high risk, high reward, but extreme systemic instability. This looks less like an army and more like a poorly diversified hedge fund built entirely on momentum trading. Tell me about the tactical profile.
Primary diagnosis, screening asphyxiation. They possess zero tactical flexibility. They are an army built entirely on the charge phase. A check army that ceases to function if the enemy simply invests a minimal amount of resources into cheap screening infantry.
Like what? Give me an example.
40 points of guardsmen, or nurglings, placed strategically 9 inches away to block the charge lane.
Ah, the investment trap. Fiscal suicide. I'm looking at reports where commanders are charging their most valuable assets, what, 400 points of elite berserkers or 8-bound?
Yes, exactly.
Into units of guardsmen. They're trading Ferraris for bicycles. This is not efficient resource allocation.
But Auditor, surely a dedicated melee army must be capable of breaking through a cheap screen.
And how do they do that, Servitor? Think.
By charging them.
And what happens before the charge? The movement phase. The World Eaters lack the shooting assets required to clear the road ahead of time. They have to rely on their limited movement or a dice roll. If the screening unit is placed correctly, the World Eaters spend their limited movement and combat potential eradicating assets worth a mere fraction of their cost. They kill the screen, but achieve 0 mission objectives, all while the enemy's main firepower is free to liquidate them.
So they get stuck.
They are trapped in a predictable and fatal bottleneck. They sacrifice operational tempo for irrelevant kills. They suffer from the misconception that destruction equals victory.
The analysis suggests that their entire macro strategy, their operational solvency, relies on the Yahtzee gambit.
The sheer, unadulterated gambling of it all.
Yes, the report highlights that.
They roll a specific combination, a 666, on the Blessings of Khorne mechanic, specifically to trigger the resurrection of Angron, their most expensive asset. This is not strategy, Servitor. This is the desperate, prayer-fueled whim of a drunken gambler in a back-alley casino.
The odds are low.
They base their entire competitive viability on a non-guaranteed dice roll that has less than a 5% chance of occurring on any given turn. When the dice fail, the audit confirms they have no backup plan. The Army effectively declares Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
And this reliance is mandated by the Angron tithe. The Primarch is a required, non-optional 415+ point asset.
An asset that has to die to be efficient. What a paradox.
The report specifies he must die, but if he dies on the wrong turn, the army collapses. This creates a terrifying strategic choice for the commander.
It's the ultimate liability. You are paying a colossal premium for an asset that must be destroyed to activate the full force of the detachment.
The buffs to the rest of the army.
Yes. If he drops too early, before the rest of the army is in position, the World Eaters lose their only pressure piece and are liquidated by mid-game shooting. But if he stays alive too long, the army is too slow to meaningfully score objectives because he is simply too high a points investment to just stand around.
A dependency loop.
A vicious dependency loop, unstable, extremely high volatility. If Angron calls in sick, the whole legion shuts down. The commander might as well concede on turn 2. Next, the Space Wolves. C status. Critical.
Pulling the file.
This entire chapter appears to be an exercise in administrative and cultural inefficiency, dressed up as rugged individualism.
The primary failure is noted as ludonarrative dissonance.
Explain.
The data clearly shows their unique Champions of Rust detachment is statistically inferior to simply using generic Space Marine doctrines.
So their identity is a handicap.
Their cultural obsession with ritual, the wolf theme, is an active, measurable hindrance to victory.
I read the reports, specifically the civilian analysis provided by Auspex Tactics, detailing the failure of this saga mechanic compared to standard operational procedures. It confirms it. The chapter's unique identity is a liability. Why do we allow this bureaucratic waste? Why should we tolerate ceremonial self-sabotage?
The key weakness is the tax compliance nightmare.
I like the sound of that.
They must complete a literal side quest, the sagas, in the middle of a firefight, just to unlock essential temporary buffs.
They have to file a multi-page tax return, complete with anecdotal evidence, and win a specific duel in the middle of a global conflict, just to get the same essential movement and attack buffs an Ultramarine gets for simply existing.
The Ultramarines get it for being in the right doctrine.
They wake up in the morning and choose violence. The wolves wake up and choose paperwork and elaborate oaths. This is why they are losing Servitor. They are chasing sagas, prioritizing winning the duel, the narrative moment, while neglecting the fundamental objective markers. They lose the war.
So they prioritize the story over the score.
And that leads to the hero hammer trap, which exacerbates this. Their unique rules structure drives them to overextend and overinvest in expensive characters just to achieve these sagas, sacrificing crucial board control and unit count.
So they put too many points into single models.
Exactly. When you commit an expensive leader, like a Wolf Lord, to a duel that is physically located away from the primary objective, you are allocating significant financial resources to an irrelevant side venture. This leads to the Wolf Tax, which demands they pay a premium for these expensive leaders to head every unit. And what does that do?
It reduces the number of functional bodies on the field.
The math is undeniable. You can't hold the board with 4 expensive, over-engineered Wolfguard units if the enemy has 12 cheap, generic scouts. The cost of leadership is sacrificing essential board presence compared to a standard Marine list.
So it's inefficient asset deployment.
Combined with a failure to grasp the scoring mechanics of modern warfare, they are constantly outmaneuvered despite their individual martial prowess. My final recommendation for the Space Wolves is simple.
What's that, Auditor?
Paint their armor blue, mandate the use of the Gladius task force until profitability is achieved, and tell them to shut up about their furry aesthetics. We must move on. Bring up the files for Batch 2, the heavy asset liability. This batch deals with the fundamental architectural problem of assets with very, very big bases.
The Imperial Knights. Status. Critical.
Yes. This audit confirms the most stunning display of rule set to model incompatibility I have ever seen. The problem is structural. A design failure that the commander cannot overcome with strategy. Primary diagnosis, terrain paralysis. Read the relevant subsection detailing the fatal interaction with ruins.
The core failure, Auditor, is rooted in the keyword interaction with the ruins rules. A god engine, such as the 400-point Knight Lancer, must physically walk around simple L-shaped ruins.
They have to walk around.
Yes, because its massive base size prevents it from being positioned over or even charging through the wall, unlike basic infantry. This is visually confirmed as a magic box problem.
A simple 3-foot-high brick wall defeats a god engine capable of leveling a city.
It does seem to be a major flaw.
The enemy doesn't need anti-tank weapons, Servitor. They just need a zoning permit and some drywall. This is not warfare. It is an argument with the local building code. You pay hundreds of points for a machine whose sheer bulk renders it useless against basic architectural features.
This inherent physical limitation feeds directly into the stat check delusion.
The what?
The stat check delusion. Commanders assume effective invincibility based on their T-122 plus profiles. They push aggressively into the midboard.
only to be immediately move-blocked by a 60-point unit of scouts deployed strategically behind that same L-shaped ruin.
Exactly.
They sit there, uselessly, unable to move on to the primary objective marker, while their opponent scores the victory points effortlessly. You pay 400 points for a model that cannot interact with the fundamental geometry of the battlefield, and its base physically cannot fit on the control point. That is gross negligence by the design committee.
Auditor, if the core mission is objective control, why do commanders continue to prioritize these assets?
Because of the illusory command structure, servitor. The Army's core synergy, the bondsman surcharge, collapses entirely. These massive big knights, which are supposed to grant crucial buffs to the smaller armigers, the little knights, are the very assets the terrain rules prevent from being used effectively.
So the synergy breaks down.
You pay for the synergistic effect, the promise of increased lethality across the entire lance, but the terrain physically prevents the chain of command from activating. It is a liquidity trap, pure and simple. The largest, most costly assets are liabilities that actively sabotage the performance of the smaller, cheaper assets. Now, Chaos Knights, E-status, terminal.
They suffer from the same issues.
The exact same architectural flaws, but their internal structure is even more imbalanced due to their competitive metrics.
Tell me about the kennel syndrome.
The forensic reality confirms that big knights, the immense tyrants and abhorrents, are mathematical liabilities.
Explain.
They are too large to hide, too expensive to trade, and their massive defensive profiles fail catastrophically against high-volume attacks featuring lethal hits. So what's the solution?
The only viable competitive organism for the faction is a swarm, a pack of 13, 14 small war dogs or armigers.
The big model fallacy trap. Commanders purchase the $170 Dominus-class models, the tyrants expecting a centerpiece, a glorious titan, to lead their forces.
But that's not what they get.
They have, in fact, purchased a 500-point target removed by turn 2. The data shows the only solvent path to victory is to liquidate the large assets and flood the board with smaller, more nimble assets. The war dogs.
The war dogs are cheaper, provide more board presence, and are easier to maneuver around the prohibitive terrain.
Precisely. Do not call them Chaos Knights, call them the dog walkers. If a commander puts a big, expensive robot on the table, they aren't playing to achieve a solvency report. They are playing to show off a painting project that is about to spontaneously explode due to inefficient asset allocation.
An emotional choice.
An emotional, not tactical choice. And it's compounded by the Titanic tithe. They pay a premium for the Titanic keyword, which, in the current rule set, acts as a measurable debuff.
A deep.
It allows the enemy true line of sight over ruins, exposing the huge models without providing adequate defensive or movement compensation.
So they're easier to see.
They pay extra for the privilege of being easier targets.
Yeah.
It is the definition of a negative asset, a cost levied for a detrimental rule interaction. The enemy doesn't even have to move to hit them. They simply shoot right over the top. The structural imbalance is terminal. The faction is financially bankrupt the moment they bring a model with a base over 100 millimeter. We must move on. Bring up the finalized Marine audits. The sheer variety of failure is exhausting.
Now for the Black Templars. F status. Critical.
Servitor, look at this quarterly report. A 39 to 42% competitive win rate. This is not a military campaign. It is a bankruptcy filing in ceremonial power armor. Read the primary diagnosis.
Primary diagnosis. Tactical identity theft.
Go on.
The most deliciously ironic failure. Their unique detachment, Righteous Crusaders, fails to provide essential functional mobility, specifically the crucial ability to advance and charge.
And so,
To maintain solvency in the current meta, they must adopt the tactical doctrine of the bureaucratic Ultramarines, the generic Gladius task force.
it is a stunning condemnation of their entire culture. They despise the Codex Astartes as limiting, yet their only hope of winning a tournament is to pretend to be Gilliman's most tedious, administratively compliant disciples.
So they become something they're not.
They are paying premium costs to function as Ultramarines in golf makeup. Their tactical identity is worthless compared to standardized Imperial procedure.
The primary operational pitfall, Auditor, is the flavor trap. The flavor trap. Aspiring commanders choose the Righteous Crusaders detachment for the vows, for the emotional narrative feel of being a crusading zealot, instead of prioritizing cold hard efficiency.
Investing based on feelings, servitor. Investing based on zealotry and inadequate movement rules is the fastest path to ruin. Without generic mobility buffs like those provided by the Gladius Task Force, their elite melee assets, their sword brethren and crusaders, they're just waddling across the board.
Not charging.
They are not charging. They are slowly, deliberately presenting themselves for asset liquidation by enemy gunfire before they ever make contact. They die 1 inch short of the enemy screening unit. Every time.
This leads directly into the logistical crime the report calls the multi-melta surcharge.
Explain this fiscal malpractice, servitor.
This is a criminal tax on possibility. Black Templar vehicle hulls, like Impulsors and Gladiators, are arbitrarily costed 10 to 15 points higher than standard Space Marine equivalents,
Right.
solely for the theoretical option to equip a multi-melta.
When I get this straight.
This unnecessary tax is paid even if the weapon is not equipped on the model, or more commonly, if the transport is destroyed before it fires a single shot.
So they pay a premium simply for the right to choose an option. They pay a prepaid, non-refundable weapon tax. We are paying a premium for an asset that might not even exist or might be liquidated before deployment. It is an administrative fee for a hypothetical weapon. This is utterly unsustainable. Mark the entire chapter as high risk, low yield. Their adherence to outdated pricing models and poor detachment rules is financially unsound. Next, G-Chaos Space Marines. Status? Stable but critically hemorrhaging efficiency.
Yes, that one.
This looks like a cyclical problem related to their place in the balance sheet.
The core failure is termed the sinner's cycle.
The sinner's cycle, appropriate.
They are currently in the punishment phase of the balance cycle. Their codex was briefly strong, so their points were hiked aggressively. Then their core rules were nerfed in the subsequent data slate.
But the high points costs remained. Let me guess.
Exactly. They are paying elite prices for units stripped of their elite rules.
They are paying luxury prices for a hatchback that is perpetually on fire. They have to bargain with their souls, initiate dark packs, just to get the same baseline hit rolls a standard Space Marine gets for free simply by complying with the codex.
It's a risk-reward mechanic.
It's a desperate attempt to force solvency out of overcosted units. And that refers to the dark pack suicide trap.
Yeah.
The Army rule allows them to boost lethality at the risk of taking mortal wounds on a failed hazardous check.
And with current high point costs, players are forced to take this risk repeatedly.
And with every failed roll, every model lost to your own rule is a statistical disaster that is magnified by the inflated point cost. They are often killing more of their own army than the enemy does.
He's self-inflicted damage.
They are financially leveraged to the hilt, and one bad dark pact initiates an instant, self-inflicted liquidation event.
This issue is compounded by the character bloat. The reliance on leaders, such as Chaos Lords, is mandatory to make basic legionaries functional. But this creates massive assassinate bait, giving up guaranteed victory points when the leader inevitably dies.
So you pay 200 points for a squad that does nothing without the accompanying 95-point character, and then you guarantee the enemy victory points when that character is removed.
That's the problem.
Inefficient deployment of command assets. They are forced to consolidate their functional rules onto vulnerable single models. They require drastic cost reductions or the return of their core unnerfed abilities. This cycle is predictable. Move on, servitor. We must examine Xeno's fiscal malpractice. Prepare batch 3. I am tired. I have audited the failures of the angels and the incompetence of the traitors.
We're pulling the file in the Eldari. H status. Critical.
This entire faction smells less like a military force and more like a Wall Street insider trading operation. What is their core vulnerability?
Primary diagnosis, the glass edge.
The glass edge.
Extreme structural fragility T3 bodies across their core infantry assets. Their defensive profile is virtually non-existent. Output is lethal, but one positioning error.
One slip-up.
A miscalculation of less than 2 inches during movement results in the immediate liquidation of 300-plus points of specialized assets.
They do not lose by attrition, Servitor. They lose by sudden cardiac arrest. They claim to be an ancient race of masters, yet their entire war strategy collapses if a single enemy rhino moves slightly faster than anticipated.
So they're unforgiving to play.
They aren't an army. They're a physics equation that cries when you punch it. Their reliance on high offensive output completely ignores basic defensive solvency. Now, let us address the true crime. The Fate Dice Casino. Read the market anomaly that defines their strategic advantage.
The Eldari roll their pool of fate dice before the market opens, before the battle begins, and strategically keep the 6s for later use on critical rolls.
They do what?
The fiscal status is categorized as insider trading. They submit a falsified, predetermined success report before the battle begins.
That is illegal. That is market manipulation on a galactic scale. Every other faction is subject to the volatility of the dice gods. The Guard prays, the Orcs scream and rely on crude probability. The Eldares simply predetermine a critical success on a key charge, a crucial save, or a devastating wound roll. They guarantee output while insulating themselves from risk in a way that fundamentally breaks the competitive parity of the game.
This capability allows them to deploy assets that would otherwise be far too risky to use.
Exactly, and this enables the Auspex tax. They pay premium points for specialists like Howling Banshees or Striking Scorpions that are hyper-specialized and useless outside their niche. Yet these units still possess the same T3 fragility and die instantly to generic bolt pistol overwatch if they fail their critical charge roll.
A role they often must use a fate die to guarantee.
So they are expensive, fragile, and niche, and must rely on market manipulation to function at a baseline efficiency. High cost, niche assets with zero durability. A terrible investment, unless the situation is perfect. The cost structure dictates that a single lost unit of Auspex warriors is a major setback, and the rules of the battlefield dictate that they will always suffer heavy losses. Sanction them.
Yes.
Sanction them all. The sheer audacity of this bureaucratic fraud is infuriating. Next, High Tau Empire. Status. Unbalanced.
Yes, Auditor.
A communistic Ponzi scheme built entirely on long-range speculation and zero domestic manufacturing of melee weaponry. What is their core failure?
Primary diagnosis. Primary objective aversion.
Aversion.
Their entire tactical portfolio is leveraged exclusively in the shooting phase. They excel at removal but are functionally and culturally incapable of standing on a circle, an objective marker. They voluntarily and often immediately cede victory points to flee melee combat, meaning they routinely lose the war 45-80.
They are playing a fixed position shooting gallery, while the enemy is playing a mobile, objective-based board game. They spend 4 turns perfecting their line of fire, wiping out 90% of the enemy assets, and then proudly report that they achieved total annihilation right before they sign the surrender form because they forgot to stand on the 40mm objective markers.
So their priorities are wrong.
Fundamentally flawed. The Cayenne delusion traps inexperienced commanders into waiting until turn 3 for their detachment buffs to activate. By then, the score is often 0-30 in favor of the opponent. The game is mathematically over, regardless of their devastating firepower in turns 4 and 5.
Waiting is a mistake.
Hiding for 2 turns, sacrificing the initial scoring opportunity, is not tactical patience, servitor. It is forfeiting the primary objective to maximize future, irrelevant damage output. Competitive warfare is not about maximizing damage. It is about maximizing VP acquisition. They confuse body count with balance sheet health.
This structural inefficiency is worsened by the observer tax.
Another tax.
They are forced to expose cheap observer units to draw line of sight and target lock their main gun platforms simply to make their primary weapons accurate, feeding the enemy easy kills.
You pay an extra cost in exposed, disposable assets simply to achieve the baseline accuracy that most other factions enjoy for free. This is an administrative fee for basic marksmanship. The Ts are brilliant at killing, but disastrous at winning the game of war. They need to liquidate their entire infantry stock and invest in basic melee training. Or, more realistically, drastically lower the cost of their basic assets to compensate for the crippling lack of objective presence. We approach the end, servitor. Bring up the final file, the terminal case, the asset that is not an asset at all.
J. Imperial Agents. Status. Terminal.
Yes. The audit confirms the lowest recorded metrics of any faction in the Imperium. A confirmed 37% efficiency rating, as noted by the civilian source, Auspex Tactics. Tell me about the primary diagnosis.
The soup syndrome. They are not an army. They are a clerical error resulting from poor administrative planning.
A clerical error. I like that.
They lack a cohesive army rule. No systemic benefit like Oath of Moment, no dark packs, no fate dice. They are merely a collection of disparate kill teams and bureaucratic retinues with zero internal synergy.
A bureaucratic retinue with delusions of adequacy. They're trying to fight armies that have spent 10 millennia practicing high-intensity warfare, and they bring a clipboard and a handful of half-hearted alliances.
The report highlights a gross misallocation of assets that borders on criminal negligence.
Get to it.
Who, Auditor, authorized the budget to deploy police officers, Adeptus Arbites, carrying shotguns and riot shields against Tyranid Biotitans and Chaos Dreadnoughts.
We are deploying civil compliance resources against Tyranid Biotitans, the sheer waste. I am looking at a report of a Proctor Exactant trying to arrest a Carnifex.
Yes, that incident is documented.
He's reading the Alienate's rights while it eats his face. This is an HR nightmare. This is worse than the Administratum hiring squigs to manage ledgers. I want the genius who proposed this codex found and reassigned to sanitation duty on a death world immediately. The asset allocation is indefensible.
Furthermore, the inquisitorial tithe proves the structural failure.
There's more.
The faction has zero native heavy anti-tank capability. They must hire an external freelancer ally in an Imperial Knight to do the one job that matters: killing enemy heavy armor.
If you must pay external contractors, or worse, beg your cousins, the Imperial Knights, to handle your core military functions, your faction has failed the audit and should be dissolved immediately. They're bringing a clipboard to a tank fight, and then they have to pay the tank driver extra to show up. This confirms systemic organ failure. Now, Servitor, let us finalize this audit and address the findings of the civilian loudmouths who track these failure numbers.
We're referring to the competitive data provided by Auspex Tactics.
Yes. The civilian data provided by Auspex Tactics confirmed the statistical autopsy. It validated our meticulous audit process. Their report notes the Imperial Knights languishing at 41% and the Imperial Agents at 37%, precisely where our internal telemetry placed them. The failure, both anecdotal and statistical, is irrefutable. K, the verdict. I will dictate the conclusion. Listen carefully and write this down, Servitor.
I'm ready.
The failure is universal across the galaxy, driven by three core liabilities: bad pricing, the Sinner's Cycle, strategic dependency, the Yahtzee Gambit, or architectural incompatibility, terrain paralysis. We must also address the secondary data provided by this, Auspex Tactics. He speaks of casual win rates, playability, and note that even the weaker lists can absolutely do great at a more casual level. And I'm aware this same civilian analyst has recently been discussing the peculiar fiscal anomalies surrounding Captain Titus, a single asset that, while undercosted, creates a functional zombie loop that shouldn't exist.
He calls it a potential negative main character tax, Auditor.
Explain that term.
Yeah. He notes that Titus, at his low point cost, provides extreme resilience and a zombie loop resurrection rule that allows him to effectively keep playing a turn after being destroyed. It's an example of competitive rules creating an unintended, efficient loop from a cheap character.
And there's the flaw in the civilian analysis. He's right about the rule set. This zombie loop is a tactical tax loophole. It grants unwarranted efficiency to a cheap model. But the problem is his priorities.
His priorities.
He acknowledges the rule set is efficient, but then he brings up the concept of fun. Servitor, we do not care about casual. We do not care about fun. That is irrelevant sentimentality. The entire purpose of this audit proves that the moment commanders choose narrative or flavor, the Space Wolves Sagas, the Black Templar's vows, or the World Leader's dependence on the Yahtzee Gambit over cold, hard, generic, reproducible efficiency.
Like the Gladius Task Force.
Yes, like the generic optimized Gladius Task Force. The moment they do that, they declare bankruptcy.
So, the civilian analyst is correct in identifying the statistical failure points, but misguided in his attempts to quantify playability or casual enjoyment.
He is correct on the statistics, but incorrect on the priorities. The competitive environment punishes fiscal inefficiency with ruthless speed. The minute you remove the hyper-optimization, the moment you move to a casual setting, the fundamental failure is masked, but the underlying systemic weakness remains. The Black Templars, forced into the Gladius Task Force because their own identity is underwhelming, are the ultimate proof. Narrative loyalty is financially unsound. Titus is an anomaly, a cheap, repeatable loophole that serves only to highlight how desperate commanders are for solvency. The current meta is a pure reflection of galactic fiscal malpractice. The goal of warfare is victory, which is synonymous with efficiency and solvency. Not enjoyable hobby time. The audit is complete. Send the finalized files to the High Lords of Terra immediately. I doubt they will read past the first page, but the paperwork must be filed.
Is that everything, Auditor?
You know, Servitor, when I condemned the Imperial agents for bringing a clipboard to a tank fight, I didn't exclude myself.
You do.
I have brought a clipboard to many tank fights across 4 centuries. But as I said before, my clipboard contained the budget authorization to remove the tank's fuel supply, or to reallocate the tank crew's rations to a more compliant sector.
I see.
The difference between an auditor and a mere Imperial agent is authority. The agents bring a clipboard hoping to document the crime. I bring a clipboard to enforce the cold, immutable law of solvency. My job is to ensure the numbers, not the narratives, survive. Now be gone. Bring me the bottle.
The bottle, Auditor. The small decanter of Amasec.
The whole bottle. The entire stock. I have just audited the entire competitive landscape of the Imperium and its enemies, and I have found it financially and strategically wanting. I require immediate operational cessation. Now go.